Hello, everyone. My name is Caetano Miranda from the Center for Greenhouse Gas Innovation, one of the leading engineering centers from FAPESP. Today, you are back in our second series of our RCGI Colloquium. We start with the FAPESP and Research Fellow, Drielli Peyerl, from the Institute of Energy and Environment and from the University of São Paulo. We are also very grateful for the general support of our founder sponsors, FAPESP and Shell, and the technical support by Ana Paula Vasconcelos from our communication team. So Professor Peyerl has a bachelor degree in history and geography, and also a master in territorial management from the State University of Ponta Grossa. She has a PhD in science from the State University of Campinas, and served as a visiting professor and researcher in several institutions abroad. She was a postdoc fellow at Unicamp and also University of São Paulo, and she is currently a young investigator from FAPESP in collaborating with the Research Center of Greenhouse Gas Innovation, RCGI, in the Institute of Energy and Environment from the University of São Paulo. So the main areas of her interest focus on the energy transition, technologies learning, and the innovation in energy systems, low carbon technology advances to the oil and gas industry and sustainability, hydrogen economy, renewable energy, and public policies. So today she'll give us a talk on the energy transition changing the Brazilian landscape over the time. Professor Drielli, please.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much to introduce me, Professor Caetano. It's an honor to talk today about the subject that I have been working the last 4-5 years. And I would like to say thank you so much for all the students that make part of this process, this research group that I coordinate here and that I talk. So first, I would like to say that I talked to Professor Caetano about my presentation, and he suggested that I would like to mention how is my work here, how is the young investigator or young researcher. This position is so important for the universities in Brazil, including São Paulo. Today we speak a bit more about, like this title, the energy transition changed the Brazilian landscape over time. But I would like to introduce a bit more about the energy transition concept. So to start my presentation, I would like to explain the young investigator position. It's come from FAPESP project. It's a wonderful idea, is all the research that have the opportunity to have this position, it's a present, it's a gift, because you can develop your own research group. So the position has 2 goals. The first goal is create a potential research group that I will talk a bit more about this in some seconds. And together with this, how you can connect it with international researchers. And another goal, it's more close to develop a new research line in the institution like universities in São Paulo. So I start my work to develop this new line with the subject of energy transition. So I'm a lecturer in the Institute of Energy and Environment. I'm responsible for the course and the post-graduation called Energy Transition, History and Perspective. In this specific course, you work with a different methodology and study the concept and the application of energy transition. This year, we start a new undergraduate course here that I'm responsible together with Professor Edmilson to call it the Energy Transition and Environment. So you are trying to explain better all these contexts that involve energy transition. The second point, together with this position and the creation of the research group, you have the group called Brazil Energy Transition. It's like around 20 students and research that work with me. And you have developed a lot of articles. In the last 3 years, we published more than 30 articles, like 4 or 5 books and chapter books. And so a lot of research that comes that integrated with energy transition. And I'll explain a bit more this in the last slides. And the last, I'm a researcher of the Research Center for Greenhouse Gas Innovation, where I work with the same subject. Follow this idea, we have to think about what is this energy transition. The people start to talk a lot about this concept. But in my classes, I teach that there is a different interpretation and forms that you can use this term. And it's sometimes more complicated. That's just we think about the energy transition for one source to another source, like to the coal, to petroleum, and I explain a bit more about this. I have some GIF, but unfortunately this does not work now. So first, this framework gives us some idea about how you can work about energy transition history and how you can work energy transition current. So this is very important to understand because I give some examples in this lecture about how this happened in the past in the Brazil and changed the landscape. But the publication of my students and I so explain a bit more like this have been occurring now. First, you have the time aspect that this transition and the history occur in decades or more than a century. And the current is the interrogation point is how you can manage the acceleration of this transition. The second aspect is the impulse. You have more worried about the exploration and the availability of the natural research, technology, innovation. And now it's the preoccupation, it's more centered in climate change, low or zero carbon, and technology too, but sometimes it's focused on energy technology or renewable technology. So this scale is changed too. In the history, you can see more, it's come more from the level of individual, local, onto the global. And today you have a lot of strength that come from global to local and sectorial. So, and the energy transition currently, you can see that it's more, the strength comes, for example, from the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals. Follow this, you can see in this picture different types of the energy transition. Today you use a new concept called the sustainable energy transition that involve a lot of multi-sectors and the people. And the same way you think that about energy addition, that it's happen now when you not replace one source by other, but you start to just addition a new, for example, renewable source in the matrix. There is another type called the low carbon energy transition. You try to remove, for example, the greenhouse gas and the CO2. And the last is the green transition. We start to think in some countries like will be this transition between the renewable, for example. So the point now that this question was the first question that when I wrote the project and I start to think about energy transition, is the point is how to accelerate the energy transition. And you have been discussion here in the last 4 years and try to develop and answer by the articles how you can do this. I can say that I can say that this is the huge challenge of the energy transition in nowadays. That include global south and the global north in each country. So you need to think better how you can conduct this. Follow this when you think about history. So history can give some lessons to learn about how you can accelerate this transition now, and can teach us a great lesson about the past, and understand the particulars of each country, help us to conduct the next energy transition in each country and contribute to the global goals. So the historical context requires to rethink the type of energy source and the methods that you can use to generate energy. And through the history, you can see how the energy source shaped the dynamic and changed the landscape. And understand the historical process, like I said, this can contribute now to understand better the process, for example, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, like one example. But the point of these lectures is centering how the Brazilian energy sector is international, known mainly for its renewable electric mix, the use of alcohol in flex fuel cars, the oil and natural gas fields and offshore area. But the point central is how the Brazilian energy background was boosted mainly by the availability of natural resources, and this is with the point of my lecture today. So the goal of this lecture, like I already said, we work with some examples of how this landscape changed, and some questions that you try to answer based on what lessons can you draw from the past energy transition. Why it's so important you understand the history to see the process of the energy transition now. So another question central, and how it's so important to see the particulars of each countries. And the last, how is the country respond, the particulars of each country respond to the course of the ongoing energy transition. First, I would like to talk about coal in Brazil. So when they start to exploration coal in Brazil, they discovered that this coal is not a good quality, it's the low quality. So Brazil in the mid of the 19th century was totally dependent of the importation of coal comes from UK. And this is one of the problem about the domestic supply of fossil fuels in Brazil, the dependence of the coal. Brazil starts a lot to invest in the search coal in Brazil, but unfortunately, this research it's the same results comes like the low quality. But in the same way, and all in the world, the coal is the first primary source. This has become the change the landscape of Brazil, because Brazil continue to invest to search coal because of the importation of technology and locomotives and others by the industry, and the dependence of the workforce and, like I said, technology from other countries. So this has become very a huge problem of Brazil. There is some works in this period that mentioned the problem of the domestic supply of fossil fuels in Brazil, centered in the coal. But the electric sector, today we speak a lot about the clean, about the Brazilian clean metrics, but it's important to mention that the first quick transition, that this is one term that I use, and when you study energy transition, occurred in 1901 in this process. You have in the first thermoelectric in 1883, and the second investment in the look for the hydraulic potential was an hydroelectric plant that that supply and where is occurred this quick energy transition in this period. So these transformations of the electric sector comes because of the potential of Brazil develop the hydraulic potential to develop hydraulic plants. And the technology of hydroelectric plants was a bit easy to get from other countries and the construction. So this is helping you to build in your electric metrics based on electric plants. Follow this about coal and petroleum in Brazil. The search for petroleum in Brazil remains secondary in the first decade of the 20th century. There is a huge problem to find petroleum in Brazil. This occurred just in 1939. And the Brazilian government insists to look for coal in Brazil because of the transportation by locomotives and the infrastructure. And the lack of geological knowledge was so fundamental. It's not so fundamental, but the lack of knowledge didn't help to Brazil to find petroleum. So for last, this part of the lack of availability fossil fuel resource was a ghost to Brazil. Is a central problem that comes by the 20th century, and Brazil needs to find some solutions to the problem of fossil fuels. You need energy. I mentioned here two different periods. One period start to look more to replace and change the transport sector. And the same way, there is the creation a lot of institutions and law that move and transform the landscape of the energy sector in this time. And there is a specific relation about energy and environment. So there is a preoccupation about environment, but this discussion starts and sometimes died. About this yet, Brazil starts to look for the dependence of firewood and they start to replace this in the same way. But the transformation comes in 1950 about the use of its attempt of solar energy, natural gas, thermal energy of the seas, wind energy. But all this type of the energy, Brazil looks for a solution, but the same way the investment were focused on the hydroelectric plant. But it's very interesting to mention this because there is a huge movement from scientists, institutions, and the Brazilian government to the implementation of this type of and the use of this source to generate energy. But like solar energy, they recognize the potential of Brazil, but about technology and so was a huge problem. And natural gas, for example, we discovered this resource in 1922, but technology again and other problems, we start to use other type of resource. So one of this problem was main technology. Follow this about transport and the electric sector again in 1950. You have a specific and again a quick transition in this period here between 1969 and 1971, where the use of gasoline like a fuel and heavy vehicles surpass and start to use diesel. This you can see until today in Brazil, and this is one of the huge problem that you have about the future of energy transition. Look for the transport sector in Brazil, the use of diesel. But the same way, the Brazil start to invest a lot part of the money in the electric sector and the construction of dam. The demand grew up a lot in Brazil, so it's necessary to see what can do. And they invested in the hydroelectric plants. Follow this idea and almost finish the first part of this presentation here. Brazil, after the oil crisis, moving away from the oil dependence. So Brazil started to invest a lot in the public policies program. One of a huge and great example is Paulo. And the same way Brazil invested in the hydroelectric plants. 90% of the electric sector it's moved by the hydroelectric plant. And for last, all this was involved with develop alternatives to guarantee energy security, industrialization, and fuel consumption. So based on that, you have some final remarks. What does the energy transition from the past touch us? I think this 5 point, it's very important for us to understand this process of history and what we can think about energy transition now. So first, the appropriation of energy research change according to the context of the period. The technology is a strong factor of this, and the design of a consistent and long-term public policies, like you see with some programs that I mentioned, like Paulo, Proinfra, is fundamental for the development and insertion of new technologies and energy sourcing in different sectors of the economy. And this is a good example because you have a lot of work to do a good public policies. I believe not a long term now, but need a short term, because is the acceleration is one of the questions that you need to answer now, and you need to implement this very quickly. Third, the presence and investment of the state are decisive for acceleration the process of building the energy sector as the interest of the government. You can see this in the history. And the global economy shapes different realities, and you can see like when start to use petroleum in the world, and all the countries and the technology move to use this type of the resource. And the last, and I would like to give some attention about this, because I think this is the major point of all the discussion. Each country needs to have a bit of luck with the energy potential available in the territory. Currently, Brazil has one of the cleanest electric matrices in the world, but you can see that a lot of investment comes because of the hydraulic potential of the country. And you start to think if Brazil found petroleum, for example, in the early decade of the 19th century and the 20th century, maybe your electric matrix will become different. But you can see how the availability of the resource makes the difference of the transformation of the landscape. So see this part of the history make us to think about how you can see what you have here in the country, how the process of the globalization can help to understand this better too. For now, I would like to mention some works that try and I think answer parts of your answer about the acceleration transition in Brazil. And part of the students and the research that work with me have developed a great work. I would like to give some examples. For example, Laurel Arendt, he defended his dissertation last year about the role of natural gas market in Brazil. Mariana Barbosa, she defended her dissertation last year too, and she worked about the decarbonization, the solutions in the state to the state of São Paulo. Look at the energy sector in São Paulo. This is one of the great work about the state of São Paulo, energy sector, and decarbonization. That is the first point. I think now we have been discussion about the future of São Paulo state. And the third work, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, Guilherme defended his dissertation, and he made a wonderful work about the public policies and the history and the use of natural gas and like a role of the energy transition. So we have here just 3 examples that work and try to answer using history and use it dates from now to understand this process of the energy transition. More specific here, you published this year 1 article about low carbon transition, and you try to show, and you show some examples about renewable energy policies and the impact of the electric metrics. But the great point of this article is it's a new concept that you discussed. It's like how these electric metrics and the future of these electric metrics is not the way that you think about energy transition, but there is a trend, a low carbon transition trend. And here I did 3 examples. One example is Chile, where you can see that it's a lot of potential to use renewable source, but the same way about energy security, Chile continues to use natural gas and other fossil fuels. And together with these numbers and the electric metrics with comes from fossil fuels and the renewable, you start to look for the CO2 equivalent emissions. The second example comes from Uruguay. Uruguay is a specific example where you see that public policies really works very well, and all the metrics not it's part of the renewable source. And for the last example, it's Venezuela. It's a totally singular case, because you can see that they stopped to use fossil fuels. You have it's not increased, but they stopped to use not because they are policies or some activities that occasion this, but the problem is that it's a forced decrease in consumption in Venezuela now. So you start to discuss this and start to show the relevance that you need to work with renewable energy policies and CO2 emissions. We studied a lot of public policies about these countries in the electric sector, and you see that the policies need to be connected with the decrease in CO2 emissions. Part of these public policies invested, and you can, for example, you need to add more renewable source, but you not replace. So in this case specific, in the use of natural gas, for example, we're up, and you start to discuss the low carbon transition trends. So this is the message of the article, that you need to think a lot about how you can manage these public policies with in the electric sector. Follow this. This is another article that I'd like to mention now. It's because of the green hydrogen. Just summation before this article, it's make part of the students from the Institute of Energy and Environment. It's Mariana Barbosa, Mariana Ciota, Maria Pelissari, and Professor Evandro Moreto. And this another article comes from my student of master degree, Sabrina Macedo. I published some years ago one chapter book about the hydrogênio, and Sabrina was very interested to develop a research about hydrogen, so we start to develop this study. This is one of the first studies about the green hydrogen electric sector in Brazil that use some examples of the electric sector. So this study focuses on the study of hybrid system for hydrogen production and storage. This is one of the reasons that the article was approved, because you calculated the possibility to produce and storage hydrogen. And you studied this case and in the two big empreendimentos here in solar and wind in Brazil. And when you calculated these numbers, you arrive at the results that the hydrogen are viable to use in another sector, and not in the electric sector to become electricity again. So when you publish this article, it's a lot of people are interested in your results that come about to think about the future of hydrogen in Brazil. Now you can see that you can use probably hydrogen more in the transport sector, or maybe you can export the hydrogen to other countries, maybe from the wind energy. So this is one of the steps that the future of the hydrogen in Brazil. Following this, you have other articles that you have been work with how you can accelerate it. You have been work to sustain development goals, but here I just would like to mention 6 of the articles that you published recently too. Like I mentioned, the work, it's the work about the barriers and lessons to learn from the use of natural gas as in the vehicular. So the results comes, and it's surprises, because there is different regions that Guilherme study. It's a Rio de Janeiro state in São Paulo state. And you can see that Brazil, when you think about energy transition in Brazil, you need to think about regions. So this is one of the point of the article. The second article, we start to study Amazonas. Is the case study of Amazonas. In this case specific, you try to supply the chain with using natural gas in the electric sector by fluvial transportation insulated system. This is very interesting to mention, because the same way that you try to use natural gas in the place like Amazon, you follow the sustained development goals and think, okay, you need to give the access of energy for all the people, and the natural gas may become a solution for these areas, the isolated systems. The another articles comes from the first author is Mariana Ciota. You develop the potential of to do CO2 storage in the plantation fields and pre-salt in the offshore area in Brazil. And another study, it's about the global, more specific about the global south and the electric sector, the difficulties that you have in this part of the global, and how you can try to understand this process better. Again, you can see how the availability of energy research comes. So. The another article is Ana Abreu. She published about public perception and CCS. She did the research, the field research in the Bahia state, and comes on the first results about public perception and CCS in Brazil. And for last, we studied about electric vehicles in Europe. You analyze 29 European Union countries to understand this process of the insertion of the electric vehicles in Europe. But like I said, we have have published a lot. It is one example that you try to answer how you can collaborate with this process of this acceleration, because it's make the hard question to answer now when you think about the energy transition. So you need a lot of work to do. And I just would like to mention the last question here. So you talk about history, about energy transition, and all these contexts, and the future, and the present too, what you live now in Brazil. But I'd like to give just this input about what will be the next energy transition. So you think that, like I said, you need to accelerate the process, but you need to think in the short, medium, and long term too. So this is become a hard answer, but you need to think more about this. So this is my presentation. Thanks so much for the time, Professor Caetano, the opportunity too. And like I told you, I just mentioned some part of the work that I realized with my students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Drielli, for very interesting talk. I have some questions from my side here, and then if the public wanna make some questions, they can give us in the YouTube channel. So the first one is regarding from the public perception. So what do you think that will be the key challenges to accelerate the energy transition, particularly in Brazil?
I think there is a huge gap between the information that comes from the university to this public. If you need to introduce a new technology for these people, it's necessary to have education programs or a lot of programs that you can work with these people. I think this is one of the central points when you mention about this technology. For example, when you here in the University of São Paulo, you discuss a lot about the CCS, carbon capture and storage. This is very normal for us. But when you start to like, if you need to do this improvement in some place and you try to discuss this and you start to ask and talk with the people about this, you can see that the people, what is this? CCS, carbon capture. I think to accelerate this, the public perception is essential. Because there is another essential point, I believe, that the people need to accept this technology too. So this is another point. Like, and some countries, like in developing countries, for example, when you need to replace some technology, like okay, I have a car moved by gasoline, but I need to invest to replace my electric car too, and I need to understand why I need to replace this, how I can contribute with environmental. So there is a lot of the questions that you need to work to answer this acceleration.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So regarding the first part of your talk, you give a very nice historical perspective from the role of, I mean, particularly in Brazil, the role of the external forces on our energy matrix and so on. But nowadays, what will be good public policies on the energy transition from your perspective?
I think there are 2 points. First, I think in the history you can see the period of these public policies is not short. There is a time to understand this process, like sometimes 4, 5, 6 years until this public policy starts to work. So today, you need to do the implementation of the public policies need to be quickly. So I think this is another interrogation that you have when you talk about public policies in Brazil, because this is process, so it's so slowly, and you not slowly, not acceleration this process about public policies too. With the history, you can see, of course, about the time, about the perspective. It is lonely, but now you need to change this very quickly and make the difference to the energy transition, because it's the world now. It's changed a lot. The transformation is very quickly. and the public policies is central for this happen.
So you do see the public, the public sector is a key agent in order to accelerate this process.
Yeah, transport sector in Brazil, yes, I believe, yes. I think there is a huge discussion now to replace vehicles using natural gas or electrical hydrogen now. In the history, you can see you are totally dependent of like the slogan, opening routes, and start to use this type of the model in Brazil. But I think you need to invest in other models too. And but Brazil, it's the history construction of the transport sector was based in roads and the use of have vehicles moved by diesel. So I think this is will be the first transformation that Brazil needs. Of course, others too, but you need to think a lot about this.
You make a comment when you discuss about the low carbon transition, that is to add more sources but not to replace. And I was wondering how to balance this in the perspective for the energy and also the environment.
For example, when you discuss low carbon transition, there is one example specific that I can give. For example, you use coal in the thermoelectric plant, and you try to replace for natural gas. So the emissions will be less than of course, that you use coal. So you can consider this like a low carbon transition. And another aspect important about this, and I like this discussion is specific. When you mention about the concept of energy transition, the people think that you need to replace this one source by another source. So this is necessary to think about how you can conduct this and all the another terms that you can use. And I think one of these terms is low carbon transition that you can see, like the example that I gave. But another point is the energy addition. When you start to addition a new source, like for example, renewable, but it's the same portion that you use that comes from fossil fuel is the same, like I show in the graphics that the article that you published, that I published with others students. So I think you need to start to think what type of the energy transition you have now. You have more some just energy addition because you don't have like a decrease in consumption, and this needs to be think. This is another point. It is one of the D of the energy transition, decrease in consumption. And or you start to use you not just be constant about this process of the energy transition.
And which are your thoughts on the future of hydrogen in Brazil? So do you see is an interesting vector of energy for us in a short or medium?
I don't know for in short term, I don't think so. I think that you invested in the renewables like wind offshore to produce green hydrogen, for example. And I think Brazil is one of the major potential to export hydrogen to other countries. But I'm critical about this because I think that in the same way that you need to do that, of course, is economy. You help countries to decarbonize your metrics. This is excellent too. But you need to think about your metrics because all the time you say, okay, Brazil has a clean electric metrics, but the energy security of us is natural gas. So you can think about hydrogen in the future. You can probably, but you need to be careful about what you have here and how you can use here this resource too. Because in all the discussion, this process of the acceleration, the transition here, I see you collaborated with other other countries and forget a bit your country. So I think the future of hydrogen is an interrogation question that Brazil needs to invest a lot now. But look for your country too, not just to another country.
Okay, perfect. In the which future scenario do you see, or would you like to see from the energy transition perspective for us?
I think I would like a balance between global north and the global south. I think this is the central point for me. It's very hard to get, because like in the history, you all the time you take your part of your resource, and sometimes not just Brazil but other country, and export this resource. Or just imported technology. The problem of technology transfer is one of another interrogation for us. But I think now, like agreements like the Paris Agreement, it's come from the global ideas, and there are a lot of targets for the developing countries. And this is hard to achieve when you don't have technology, or you don't have enough, just not the technology, but the structure to become this a reality in these countries. So for me, and there is the first question that you need to answer about deceleration, energy transition. But the second question, it's you need to how you can balance the global south and the global north, because you need help, they need help. So you need to find this balance. How? This is the question.
Yes, thank you so much for your talk, and also all the open questions that come from your work and your unique perspective on the energy transition. Thanks a lot, Drielli.
Thank you so much, Professor Caetano. It's a pleasure to talk about my work here. Again, I would like to say thank you, the Research Center for Greenhouse Gas Innovation, that helped me a lot in all this process. The FAPESP that gave me the opportunity 3 years and a half ago. But I would like to say again, thanks so much. And my students and the research that work with me will understand this now. But I would like to say thank you so much for being part of this process with me.
Thanks a lot.